Welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Today I'm reviewing Robin Hobb's Mad Ship. This is book 2 of the Liveship Traders Trilogy. And there might be some spoilers in this video for book 1 of the Liveship Traders Trilogy, which is Ship of Magic. I'll put a link in the description below to my review of that. Now, there is absolutely no lull in this middle book whatsoever. It actually builds very nicely on the character work and the world building that occurred in book 1. And it also, at the same time, develops the plot in some very exciting directions. It also, I think, provides some extremely memorable moments of triumph and pain. And the pain is all that more compelling because Hobb's characters are just so real. Their struggles are just that much more intense because of how psychologically developed they are. One example that happens early in this story has to be one of the most vividly described surgical scenes I've ever encountered in a book. I also should mention that these poignant scenes include one attempted rape that is described in detail, and also the repeated rape of another character, which is not described as it happens, but instead is dealt with very poignantly, I think, in its emotional aftermath. Along with the plot, Ship of Magic develops the magical system in the realm of the Elderlings in some very interesting ways. And this includes some events in the Rain Wilds, a place of deep mystery that we only heard about in the first book. I can't describe this in detail because I want to avoid spoilers for this video, but as in many other fantasies, the magical system is intimately related to an ancient buried civilization and to its connections to the unfathomable creatures of the past that once interacted with it. Hobb has a very unique take on dragons in the realm of the Elderlings, and that is especially so, I'm finding, in the Liveship Traders Trilogy. But once again, the most powerful thing about Hobb's writing, in my opinion, would be her characters. And they're just so beautifully sketched, and their mental landscapes are so thoroughly explored that they feel like complex, real people. This complexity also applies to the sentient creatures that are not human in the story. And they have minds that are kind of familiar, but really in some important ways very foreign to human ways of thinking. I'm going to spend most of the rest of this video focusing on these characters and where they fit in the plot. I absolutely love where Hobb takes Althea's character after the difficulties and the maturation that she underwent in the first book. Althea remains determined in her quest to captain her beloved live ship Vivacia, but her struggles have given her some very interesting and much needed perspective to take other people's feelings into account and their needs. And really, she remains extremely conflicted in many ways, not least in terms of her love life, her love interests. And these take some very interesting twists in Mad Ship. One of the best things about Althea, from my perspective, is how Hobb uses her character to explore a woman who is confronting and rejecting societal expectations to embrace her own independence and dealing with the consequent losses that decision entails. Brash and Trell provides another excellent storyline that portrays his struggles with his addiction and his heartache, always overshadowed by his sense of failure and his unhealthy coping mechanism of walking away. His character arc, for me, is one of the most interesting, and it develops in a way that gives great satisfaction to the reader as he begins to reach that potential that Althea's father always saw in him. Malta Vestrit is a character I have complained about as being a dangerous combination of naive and manipulative. Her part of the narrative is predominantly domestic in nature, and there are some echoes of the sort of drama you might expect in maybe a Jane Austen book, something of that nature. And I think that's an apt comparison because Hobb executes it so well with so many wonderful psychological observations. However, I would also say that Malta's relationship with Rain Cuprus it takes a very interesting direction and it brings her well outside her comfort zone. And there's some really interesting growth through the crises that she endures. And this really did have me warming up to her character a bit more, so I was very pleased with that. Ronica Vestrit continues in her rather impressive role as matriarch of the Vestrit family, with her grief overmatched only by her fierce protectiveness of her loved ones. And out of the shadow of her husband, Kyle Haven, Kefria develops into a character that I can actually root for. And I hope to see more of that in her. And there are signs of that really toward the end of the book. And even little Selden begins to take on some personality near the end of Madship. Wintro might just be my favorite character in the story, although I have to say maybe it's a close tie with Althea. But it seems to me that Hobb has something very special in mind for Wintro. I feel like he and Fitzchivalry Farseer should get together and commiserate about all the stuff that Robin Hobb put them through. The physical and the psychological scars that Wintro is accumulating through Madship is just, they're almost overwhelming. But there's also some very interesting growth for him. And especially as he adjusts to what he feels Sa has destined for him. And I think because Hobb does relationships as well as anybody writing in fantasy, it's Wintro's relationships with Vivacia and Kenneth and Etta that most define him and spur his development. Speaking of Kenneth and Etta, I really love where Hobb takes both of these characters. As quirky and full of the sense of himself as ever, Kenneth and his luck are very challenged by the loss that he suffered at the end of book 1. And there is some added depth to him as well as we get some glimpses of the abuse and the trauma that he suffered in his boyhood, which actually might provide some interesting clues for the rest of the plot, I think. And then, of course, there's Etta, who becomes much more fleshed out in this book than in the first. And she's growing into, I think, a fairly sympathetic character in some ways, particularly in her interactions with Wintro. And then there are the live ships. Blood-soaked and traumatized, Vivacia struggles with the conflicting loyalties pulling at her as a result of becoming a pirate ship. And lurking beneath her present struggles is the vast secret of the live ship's origins, something that is intimately connected with the magic that I mentioned earlier. We meet other live ships as well, and each of them has a unique personality, but the one that is, other than Vivacia, most explored would have to be Paragon, and his interactions with Amber, who remains a very fascinating wild card in this book, and also with Althea and Brashen, will bring him to a point where he too must confront the secrets of his past. So, with all these vivid characters and their intertwining storylines, the book builds to its final 150 or so pages, which just fly by with excitement and investment. I've thoroughly enjoyed Madship, and it has me absolutely eager to continue with the Liveship Traders Trilogy. I probably won't be able to resist reading the third book for very long. And that concludes my review of Madship. I hope that if you like this sort of content that you will consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And please come back for some more reviews of some more great fantasy. Until next time.